Talking to Gary Dubiel of Spec Fever Guide Service here based out of Oriental, Neuse River, North Carolina. Gary, let's kind of talk about how trout are a very unique species in the fact of the schools that they travel in. There's always different opinions about you can only catch gator trout solo. They don't hang out in the school. What's your opinion about that?
Where trout are, no matter what size there are conditions that are conducive for trout to be there, or they wouldn't be there. Right in the middle of a school of small trout probably isn't a big trout. If he is, or she is particularly, you probably don't have very good odds to catch one because she's got no problem eating junior. So if you're working an area and you find trout, probably the worst thing to do is to kick over the motor and run somewhere else as fast as you can.
Right.
It would be a better approach to work that area because obviously you have water temperature and water conditions and a food source that's conducive for speckled trout, and you may only have to make short distance adjustments to locate larger fish.
Yeah, and so those larger fish I have heard might be on the outside of those schools, or what you're saying is at least in close proximity to those
Correct.
schools. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Is there, talking about an actual specific fishing location and how you break down what, in your mind is an ideal speckled trout fishing location, is there anything, let's just talk about specifically, is there anything that you look for that, just generally speaking? Do you rank any type of structure over the other, like grass lines, docks, oyster beds, or is number one thing you're looking for bait and
bait, and you want water, casting distance in our area, casting distance to the bank, 5 foot or less at the boat. If you have points, if you have oyster beds, if you have dark bottom, if you have sloughs, there are areas of structure that hold speckled trout. What that is for the day, you could have the prettiest oyster bar on the planet. If there's no food on it or the temperature's wrong, It doesn't mean there's going to be a fish there. All right. So finding appropriate temperatures and finding food availability is always a step up over a particular structure. I'm not a huge fan of docks. I find docks very interesting, that you'll find speckled trout in the vicinity of a dock.
Right.
If the dock is on appropriate structure and there's a food source nearby.
Right.
But if you went and just fished docks, the odds of a dock holding fish are very minimal, particularly in the Neuse, because we have no lunar rise and fall and tide, therefore we have no current.
Right.
And without current, there's no reason for those fish to utilize that dock.
Right.
Very long docks that stick out a considerable distance, act a lot like a pier in a way, as it prevents the bait from swimming through the dock, and the bait may push up to that and then slow up or hesitate, which may cause a sort of a bottleneck, or the bait may be forced to swim around that dock, and those might be ambush areas. But the dock structure itself, in that case, is nothing more than the bottleneck.
What type of bait, and I know this changes throughout the seasons, but is there a specific type of, let's say you pull into a creek and there's no bait, there's no life there. You say, okay, let's move on from this creek. You pull into another creek and there's a certain type of bait. Is there a certain type of bait that you look for and say, this is where we need to fish?
Not particularly.
Okay.
Food is food, and so
yeah.
In our area, the two easiest baits to see are menhaden and mullet.
Right.
And I don't necessarily have to see small mullet if I'm in an area where there's big mullet, and I can see big mullet. That's a pretty good indication that there's probably small mullet, and small mullet is food. And so speckled trout do not care what they eat that particular day.
Right.
And they're not intelligent enough to know that, well, hey, it's too cold, there's no shrimp here.
Yeah.
Right? Or they're not going to say, well, I'm not going to eat a mullet today.
Yeah.
I'm only eating menhaden. They eat what they can because they grow very fast and they need the calories to survive.
Absolutely.